Imagine spending years of your life chasing something. You sell everything you own. You cross an ocean. You survive a robbery, a war, a desert that stretches so far it swallows the horizon. You nearly die, more than once. And when you finally reach the place where your treasure is supposed to be buried, you dig through sand and stone until your hands bleed, and it is not there. Instead, a stranger beats you, laughs at you, and accidentally tells you where the treasure actually is. It was buried underneath the exact spot where you started, right where you had that dream in the first place. This is the story of The Alchemist, and the reason it has sold over 100 million copies is not because of the treasure. It is because of everything that happened on the way to finding it. Over the next hour, I will walk you through every key idea, every turning point, and every lesson hidden inside Paulo Coelho's masterpiece. This is the story of a shepherd boy named Santiago, who has a recurring dream about treasure buried near the Egyptian pyramids. And that dream sets off a journey that will strip away everything he thinks he knows about success, about love, about fear, and about what it actually means to live a life worth living. But here is what makes this book different from every other story about following your dreams. It does not pretend the path is easy. Santiago does not float from one victory to the next. He gets robbed, he gets stranded in a country where he does not speak the language. He falls in love with a woman who tells him to leave her behind. He sits across from a man who holds a sword to his forehead and asks him if he is ready to die. And at every single one of those moments, he has to decide whether the dream is still worth it, whether the thing pulling him forward is stronger than the thing pulling him back. That question, that tension between comfort and calling, is what makes this book feel less like a fable and more like a mirror. Because at some point in your life, you have faced the same choice. You just might not have recognized it. Chapter 1. The Dream and the King. A boy named Santiago is sleeping inside a ruined church in the Spanish countryside. The roof caved in long ago, and an enormous sycamore tree has grown right through the floor where the altar used to stand. His flock of sheep is huddled around him. He uses a book as a pillow, and he makes a mental note that he needs to start reading thicker books because they last longer and they are more comfortable to sleep on. He is not what you would expect. He is a shepherd, yes, but he was supposed to be a priest. His parents scraped together everything they had so he could attend seminary school. He studied Latin, theology, the things you study when your family wants you to become someone respectable. But from the time he was a child, he wanted one thing more than anything else. He wanted to see the world. And one afternoon, he finally told his father. He said he did not want to be a priest. He wanted to travel. Now picture his father in that moment. A simple farmer. A man who has spent his entire life in the same place, drinking the same water, sleeping under the same roof. And his son is telling him he wants to throw it all away. But instead of arguing, instead of shouting, his father reaches into a drawer and pulls out a small pouch. Inside are 3 ancient Spanish gold coins. He says he found them in the fields years ago. He had been saving them, and he hands them to his son and says, "Use these to buy your flock. Go to the fields, and someday you will learn that our countryside is the best and our women the most beautiful." And as Santiago takes the coins, he sees something in his father's eyes, a flicker, a longing. His father had wanted to travel too. He had carried that same dream once, but he buried it under years of routine, under the weight of water to fetch, and food to find, and a family to keep alive. Santiago sees all of that in a single look, and he decides he will never let that happen to him, so he becomes a shepherd. For 2 years, he wanders the fields of Andalusia with his flock, and he loves it. He reads books, he learns the rhythms of the land, he trades wool in small villages, he even develops feelings for a merchant's daughter in a town he visits once a year. Life is simple, and it is good, but then something happens that disrupts everything. He has a dream, the same dream, 2 nights in a row. In it, a child appears in a field, plays with his sheep, then takes Santiago by the hand and transports him to the Egyptian pyramids. The child says, "If you come here, you will find a hidden treasure." And right before the child can show him exactly where the treasure is buried, Santiago wakes up. Now, most of us would shake that off. A weird dream, nothing more. But it nags at him, so he visits an old gypsy woman in the town of Tarifa who claims to interpret dreams. She listens to his story, studies his hands, and then says something he does not expect. She says, "You must go to the pyramids in Egypt. I have never heard of them, but if a child showed them to you, they exist, and there you will find your treasure." Santiago is irritated. He walked all the way to her house for this. She basically told him to do the obvious thing. But there is a catch. She wants 10% of whatever he finds. He agrees, mostly because he has no intention of actually going to Egypt, and he leaves. Later that day, he is sitting on a bench in the town plaza reading a book, when a strange old man sits beside him. The man asks what he is reading. He makes small talk, and then out of nowhere, he picks up a stick and begins writing in the sand. Santiago looks down and sees the name of his father, the name of his mother, the name of the seminary he attended, the name of the merchant's daughter, a name Santiago himself did not even know. Things he had never told anyone, written in the sand by a stranger. The old man says his name is Melchizedek. He says he is the king of Salem, and he tells Santiago something that will echo through every chapter of this book. He says, "When you truly want something, the entire universe conspires to help you achieve it." Think about that for a moment. Not that the universe makes it easy, not that doors magically open, but that when you commit to something fully, forces begin to move that you cannot see. The right people appear, the right accidents happen, the path reveals itself, not all at once, but step by step. Melchizedek calls this your personal legend, the thing you were put on earth to accomplish. He says everyone knows their personal legend when they are young, but as time passes, a mysterious force convinces them it is impossible. Fear, doubt, other people's expectations, and slowly, the dream gets buried. Sound familiar? Think about yourself at 14, 15 years old. What did you want? What lit you up? And what happened to that fire? But Melchizedek does not just give Santiago a pep talk. He tells him a story. He says, "Imagine a shopkeeper sends his son to learn the secret of happiness from the wisest man in the world. The boy walks through the desert for 40 days and finds this wise man living in a beautiful castle on top of a mountain. The castle is alive with people, music, feasts. The wise man is too busy to talk, so he hands the boy a teaspoon with 2 drops of oil and says, 'Walk around my palace, see everything, but do not let the oil spill.' So the boy wanders the halls for 2 hours, eyes glued to the spoon, terrified of losing the oil. When he returns, the wise man asks, 'Did you see the Persian tapestries, the gardens, the parchments in my library?' The boy saw nothing. He was too focused on the spoon, so the wise man sends him back. This time, the boy takes in everything: the art on the ceilings, the mountains through the windows, the flowers in the courtyard. He returns and describes it all in beautiful detail. And the wise man looks at the spoon. The oil is gone, and here is what the wise man says: 'The secret of happiness is to see all the marvels of the world and never forget the drops of oil on the spoon.' In other words, live fully, drink in everything life offers, chase the big dreams, but never lose sight of the small, precious things that ground you. Your relationships, your health, the people who love you, the quiet moments that do not look impressive from the outside, but hold your life together. It is not one or the other. It is both. And that tension between the adventure and the anchor is the entire journey Santiago is about to take. Before they part, the old king gives Santiago 2 stones from a golden breastplate, one black, one white. He calls them Urim and Thummim. He says they can help Santiago read omens when he is lost. But he adds something important. He says, Try to make your own decisions. And then Santiago gives the old king 6 of his sheep, watches him walk away, and stands alone on a hilltop in Tarifa, looking out across the water toward Africa, between his flock, the life he knows, and Egypt, the life he dreams of. The wind picks up, the same wind that once carried the Moors across the sea, and Santiago makes his choice. He sells the rest of his sheep, he buys a ticket, and he crosses the strait into Africa. Chapter 2. The First Betrayal. Santiago steps off the boat in Tangier, and immediately everything is wrong. The streets are narrow and loud. Men smoke from enormous pipes and pass them hand to hand. Women cover their faces. Priests climb towers and chant, while everyone around him drops to their knees and presses their foreheads to the ground. And then the real problem hits him. He forgot one detail, just one, that could keep him from his treasure for a very long time. Nobody here speaks Spanish, only Arabic. He is 17 years old, alone in a country he does not understand, and the only thing between him and the pyramids is an entire desert he has no idea how to cross. He sits down in a bar and points at a drink someone else ordered. It turns out to be a bitter tea. He hates it. He wants wine, but wine is forbidden here. And then, like an answer to a prayer, a young man walks up and speaks to him in Spanish. The boy is relieved. Finally, someone he can talk to. The young man is friendly, curious, asks where Santiago is headed. Santiago tells him he needs to get to the pyramids. The young man says he can help. He knows the way, but they will need 2 camels. Santiago would need to show him his money first. Now ask yourself, what would you do? You are 17. You are alone in a foreign city. You do not speak the language, and the only person who has been kind to you asks to see your money. Santiago reaches into his pouch and shows him everything he has. Every coin from the sale of his sheep, his entire life savings. The bar owner watches this happen and starts shouting at Santiago in Arabic. The young man pushes the owner aside and says, "He wants your money. Let us get out of here." And Santiago trusts him, because in that moment, trusting him feels like the only option. They walk into the market together. Thousands of people, stalls everywhere, vegetables next to daggers, carpets next to tobacco. And then Santiago sees it, the most beautiful sword he has ever seen. Silver scabbard, black handle encrusted with jewels. He stares at it for just a moment. Just a moment. And when he turns around, his new friend is gone. The money is gone. Every single coin gone. Santiago stands there as the market empties around him. The sun sets. The stalls fold up. The voices fade. That morning, he had been a shepherd in Spain with 60 sheep and a future. Now he is standing in a foreign city with no money, no language, no way home, and not a single person who knows his name. All of this happened between sunrise and sunset. He sits down and he cries. He had never even cried in front of his sheep. But now, alone in an empty plaza in Tangier, he weeps. And in that moment, his mind goes to a dark place. He thinks, I am going to become bitter. I am going to distrust everyone because one person betrayed me. I am going to hate people who found their treasure because I never found mine. I am going to hold on to what little I have because I am too small to conquer the world. Have you ever been there? Not necessarily robbed in a foreign country, but in that place where something falls apart so completely that you start writing the rest of your story in your head and every version ends badly? But then Santiago reaches into his pouch and finds 2 things: the heavy book he was carrying and the 2 stones, Urim and Thummim, the ones the old king had given him. He holds them in his hand and something shifts. They remind him that he met a king, that the king knew things about him no stranger could have known, that the universe, whatever that means, had not abandoned him. He looks around the empty marketplace and makes a decision. He says to himself, I am not a victim of a thief. I am an adventurer in search of treasure. That single reframing from victim to adventurer is one of the most important moments in this entire book, because nothing about his situation changed. He still has no money. He still has no way home. He still has no idea what he is doing. The only thing that changed is the story he told himself about what was happening to him. And sometimes that is the only thing that needs to change. But a decision without action is just a wish. So what does Santiago actually do? Chapter 3. The Crystal Merchant. The next morning, Santiago wakes up in the marketplace as the sun rises. He has nothing. No money, no food, no plan. But he watches a candy seller setting up his stall, and he helps him carry boxes and arrange the display. The man does not speak Spanish. Santiago does not speak Arabic. And yet somehow they understand each other perfectly. Santiago notices this, that two people who share no language just communicated without a single word. He thinks about his sheep, how he always knew what they needed without them saying anything, and he realizes something. There is a language beneath language, a way of communicating that does not depend on words. He had been using it for years and never noticed. He walks up the hill through the narrow streets of Tangier and stops in front of a crystal shop. The windows are filthy. The glasses inside are dull and dusty. Nobody is coming in. The owner, an old merchant, sits behind the counter looking defeated. Santiago walks in and says, "I will clean every glass in your window. In exchange, give me something to eat." He does not wait for an answer. He takes off his jacket and starts cleaning. Within 30 minutes, 2 customers walk in and buy crystal. When he finishes, the merchant takes him to a small cafe for lunch. And then the merchant says something that surprises Santiago. He says, "I did not need you to clean the glass. The Quran requires me to feed anyone who is hungry." Santiago asks then, "Why did you let me do it?" And the merchant says, "Because the crystal was dirty, and both of us needed to cleanse our minds of negative thoughts." The merchant offers Santiago a job. The boy accepts, not because he wants to sell crystal for the rest of his life, but because he needs money to buy sheep and go home. He calculates it will take him about a year to save enough. And so begins one of the most quietly powerful stretches of this entire story. Because what happens over the next 11 months is not dramatic. There are no sword fights, no desert crossings, no prophecies. It is just a boy working in a shop day after day, learning a new language, learning a new trade, and slowly transforming everything around him without even trying. One day, Santiago notices a man climbing the hill, exhausted, complaining that there is nowhere to get a drink after such a steep walk. Santiago has an idea. He says to the merchant, "What if we serve mint tea in crystal glasses? People will drink the tea and fall in love with the glassware." The merchant resists. He has been doing things the same way for 30 years. He does not want change. But eventually he agrees, and it works beautifully. Men climb the hill, drink tea from crystal glasses, and buy sets for their homes. Word spreads, more customers come. The merchant hires 2 employees. He starts importing tea alongside his crystal. The shop becomes the most popular destination on the hill. Other shops try to copy him, but none of them are at the top of the hill. So why does this matter? It is just a tea business, right? But think about what really happened here. Santiago did not have a business plan. He did not have funding or connections or experience. He had an instinct. He noticed a problem. People were thirsty at the top of a hill, and he connected it to an opportunity. Beautiful glasses that nobody was buying. That is what the old king meant by reading omens. It is not mystical. It is paying attention. It is being present enough in your own life to see what is right in front of you when everyone else walks past it. But here is where the story gets deeper. One evening, Santiago and the crystal merchant sit together smoking a hookah pipe as the sun goes down, and the merchant begins to talk about his life. He tells Santiago about the 5th pillar of Islam, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Every Muslim is supposed to make this journey at least once, and the merchant has wanted to go since he was young. He had the money decades ago. He could have closed the shop, traveled to the holy city, and come back a changed man. But he never went, and the reason he gives is one of the most haunting lines in this entire book. He says, "It is the thought of Mecca that keeps me alive. That is what helps me face these days that are all the same. These mute crystals on the shelves, and lunch and dinner at that same horrible cafe. I am afraid that if my dream is realized, I will have no reason to go on living." Let that settle for a moment. This man is not lazy. He is not incapable. He is afraid of the emptiness on the other side of getting what he wants. He has built his entire identity around the longing, not the living. The dream of Mecca is more comfortable than the reality of Mecca could ever be, because as long as it stays a dream, it is perfect. It cannot disappoint him. It cannot fall short. And if you are being honest with yourself right now, you probably know someone like this. You might even be someone like this, holding on to a goal you have no intention of pursuing, telling yourself that someday is a real day on the calendar, using the dream as a security blanket instead of a compass. The merchant looks at Santiago and says, "You have been a real blessing to me. Today I understand something I did not see before. Every blessing ignored becomes a curse. I know the things I should be able to accomplish, and I do not want to do so." He gives Santiago permission to sell tea in crystal glasses, not because he believes in the idea, but because he cannot hold back the river any longer. 11 months pass. Santiago saves enough money to buy 120 sheep, a return ticket to Spain, and a license to import goods from Africa. He is richer than he was before he got robbed. He could go home right now and double his flock and live a comfortable life. And that is exactly what he plans to do. He goes to the merchant one morning and says, "I am leaving today." And the old merchant says something that stops him cold. He says, "I am proud of you. You brought a new feeling into my crystal shop, but you know that I am not going to go to Mecca, just as you know that you are not going to buy your sheep." Santiago is startled. "What do you mean?" And the merchant simply says, "Maktub. It is written." Santiago goes upstairs to pack his bags, and in the corner of his room, he finds the old shepherd's pouch he had forgotten about for almost a year. He opens it, and out fall the 2 stones, Urim and Thummim. He had forgotten about the old king. He had forgotten about the pyramids. He had gotten so comfortable, so safe, that the dream had almost died. But the stones remind him, and he stands there in that room above a crystal shop in Tangier, holding 2 rocks from a golden breastplate, and he has to make the same choice all over again. Go home, where life is familiar and certain, or keep going toward a treasure that might not exist, across a desert that might kill him. He looks out the window at the hills of Andalusia, just 2 hours away by boat, and then he turns around, walks downstairs, walks past the merchant without saying goodbye because he does not want to cry, and walks straight toward the warehouse where the caravans gather. He is going to cross the Sahara. Chapter 4. The Desert Crossing. The warehouse smells like animals, sweat, and dust. Santiago walks in carrying his bags and sits down on a bench. Nearby, a young Englishman is reading a chemistry journal and looking irritated. He has suitcases full of books. He does not want to talk to anyone. Santiago pulls out his own book, the same one he has been trying to read for 2 years. He still cannot get past the first few pages, but something more important is happening. Santiago looks around this grimy warehouse and realizes something about decisions. Making a decision is only the beginning. Once you commit, a current picks you up and carries you to places you never imagined when you first said yes. He had said yes to a treasure hunt, and now he is sitting in a corral about to ride a camel across the largest desert on earth with 200 strangers. The Englishman notices the 2 stones in Santiago's hand and nearly falls off the bench. He shouts, "Urim and Thummim." Santiago is stunned. How does this man know what they are? It turns out the Englishman has spent his entire life studying something called alchemy. the ancient science of transforming lead into gold. He has read hundreds of books. He has spent his family's fortune chasing this knowledge, and now he is heading to an oasis called Al-Fayoum because he heard that a legendary alchemist lives there, a man rumored to be over 200 years old, a man who has discovered the philosopher's stone. The Englishman wants to find him and learn his secrets. Two strangers, two quests, one caravan heading into the desert. Santiago is looking for treasure at the pyramids. The Englishman is looking for an alchemist at an oasis, and the universe has placed them side by side. The caravan leader gathers everyone together, almost 200 people, 400 animals, camels, horses, mules, women, children, men with swords and rifles. He makes everyone swear an oath by their own god that they will follow his orders, because in the desert, disobedience means death. A bugle sounds, and they move. For the first few days, there is noise and chaos, shouting, animals whinnying, merchants arguing. But as the days stretch on, the desert silences everything. People stop talking. Even at night, around the fires, the conversations thin out. The desert does that to people. It is so vast, so endless, that it makes you feel small enough to stay quiet. Santiago puts his book away. He stops trying to read. He starts watching. The sand, the sky, the way the caravan adjusts its path around boulders and salt flats, always guided by a single star on the horizon. And he begins to understand something. The caravan and the desert are speaking to each other. The desert tests every step. The caravan responds, and no matter how many detours they take, they keep moving toward the same point. It reminds him of life. You make plans, and life throws a boulder in your path. You go around it, you adjust, but if your compass is set, if you know what you are moving toward, the detours do not matter. They are just the desert doing what the desert does. At night, Santiago becomes friends with one of the camel drivers, a quiet man who had once been a farmer near Cairo. He had an orchard, he had children, he had made his pilgrimage to Mecca and was ready to die in peace. And then one year, the Nile flooded and destroyed everything he owned. The land was ruined, his orchard was gone. He had to start over completely. So he became a camel driver, and here is what this man says. A man who lost everything and now leads camels through the desert for a living. He says, "That disaster taught me to understand the word of Allah. People need not fear the unknown if they are capable of achieving what they need and want. We are afraid of losing what we have, whether it is our life or our possessions. But this fear evaporates when we understand that our life stories and the history of the world were written by the same hand." Santiago asks him how he stays so calm, even now with rumors of tribal wars swirling around the caravan, armed Bedouins appearing on the horizon, everyone whispering about raids, and the camel driver says something that stops Santiago in his tracks. He says, "When I am eating, that is all I think about. If I am on the march, I just concentrate on marching. If I have to fight, it will be just as good a day to die as any other. I do not live in either my past or my future. I am interested only in the present. If you can concentrate always on the present, you will be a happy man." Think about how rarely we do that. Right now, as you listen to this, part of your mind is somewhere else, thinking about tomorrow, replaying yesterday, planning, worrying, rehearsing conversations that might never happen. When was the last time you were fully in one moment, not performing presence, actually in it? The camel driver has nothing. He lost his farm, his orchard, his old life, and he is more at peace than most people with a full bank account and a 5-year plan. Because he figured out the one thing almost everybody misses. You cannot live 2 moments at once. And the one you are in right now is the only one that is real. The caravan speeds up as the war rumors intensify. Fires are no longer lit at night. Sentinels patrol the edges. The animals sleep in circles with the people in the center. And then one night, Santiago looks at the horizon and sees what he thinks are stars sitting on the desert floor. The camel driver smiles. Those are not stars. That is the Oasis. Santiago wakes before dawn and sees it for the first time. An endless row of date palms stretching across the sand. 50,000 trees, 300 wells, colored tents spread between them like scattered jewels. It is not the small cluster of palms around a puddle that he imagined from geography books. It is bigger than most towns in Spain. The desert is behind him, and something he never expected is about to be in front of him. Chapter 5. The Oasis and Fatima. The Englishman is frantic. He wants to find the alchemist immediately. He drags Santiago around the oasis all day, searching tent by tent, asking anyone who will listen. Nobody seems to know what an alchemist is. They ask a woman at the well, and she warns them not to speak with women dressed in black. They are married. They ask an old man, and he says if such a powerful person exists, even the tribal chiefs cannot see him unless he agrees. They are running out of options. And then a young woman appears at the well. She is not dressed in black. She carries a vessel on her shoulder. Her face is uncovered. Santiago approaches her to ask about the alchemist. And the moment he looks into her eyes, everything stops. Not metaphorically. For Santiago, time itself seems to hold its breath. He sees her dark eyes. He sees lips poised between a laugh and silence. And he understands something he has never understood before. Not from his sheep, not from his books, not from the old king or the crystal merchant or the desert. He understands love, not the idea of love, love itself, the kind that does not require explanation any more than the universe requires one as it moves through infinite space. Her name is Fatima. She is a woman of the desert. And Santiago knows, with a certainty he has never felt about anything in his life, that she is the reason the universe brought him here. But here's the question. What do you do when the thing you have been searching for and the thing you just found pull you in opposite directions? Every day, Santiago goes to the well and waits for Fatima. They talk. She tells him about the desert. He tells her about his sheep, his dream, the old king, the crystal shop. They become friends, and then something more, and Santiago begins to think, maybe Fatima is his treasure. Maybe this is where the journey was supposed to end. The pyramids can wait. The dream can wait. He has enough money. He has love. He has peace. Why risk all of that for a pile of gold he might never find? But the desert is not finished with him. One afternoon, Santiago wanders beyond the oasis and sits on a rock, watching two hawks circle overhead. He follows their flight, trying to read their pattern, the way he used to read the movements of his sheep. And then one hawk dives at the other, and in that split second, an image flashes through Santiago's mind. An army with swords drawn, riding into the oasis. It hits him like a punch. He has had a vision. The oasis, a place of peace, protected by tradition, where no weapons are allowed, is about to be attacked. He tells the camel driver what he saw. The camel driver does not dismiss it. He says, the desert fills men's hearts with visions, but he also tells Santiago a story. He once visited a very old seer, the wisest and most feared fortune teller he had ever met, and that seer told him something that changed how he thought about the future. He said, I do not read the future, I guess at it. Based on the omens of the present. The secret is here in the present. If you pay attention to the present, you can improve upon it. And if you improve on the present, what comes later will also be better. The seer said that God only reveals the future under extraordinary circumstances, and when he does, it is for one reason only. It is a future that was written to be changed. Santiago decides to warn the tribal chieftains. He walks into the enormous white tent at the center of the oasis. Inside, 8 chiefs sit on embroidered silk cushions. Gold lamps hang from the ceiling. Silver trays of spices and tea move between servants, Hookahs fill the air with sweet smoke. Santiago is a teenage shepherd from Spain, standing in front of the most powerful men in the desert. He tells them what he saw: the hawks, the army, the attack, and they debate. Some laugh, some are suspicious. Why would the desert reveal its secrets to a foreigner when they have lived here for generations? Santiago says, because my eyes are not yet accustomed to the desert. I can see things that eyes used to it might not see. The eldest chief, the most powerful man at the table, has been silent through the entire argument. Finally, he speaks. He tells the story of Joseph from the Bible, a man thrown into a dungeon and sold as a slave, a stranger in Egypt who interpreted the Pharaoh's dreams of thin cows and fat cows and saved the entire country from famine. The chief says the tradition teaches us to believe the messages of the desert, and then he gives the order: tomorrow, for the first time, every man in the oasis will carry arms. If the enemy comes, they will be ready. But there is a condition: for every 10 dead enemies, Santiago will receive a gold coin. If the enemy does not come, Santiago will die. That night, walking back to his tent under a full moon, Santiago is terrified. He bet his life on a vision, and then something happens that terrifies him even more. A thundering sound, a white horse rearing above him, a horseman dressed entirely in black, falcon on his shoulder, face covered except for his eyes. The man draws an enormous curved sword and holds the blade to Santiago's forehead. A single drop of blood runs down the boy's face. The horseman demands, "Who dares to read the meaning of the flight of the hawks?" Santiago says, "It is I. Many lives will be saved because I was able to see through to the soul of the world." The sword does not fall. The horseman studies him, tests his courage, and finally speaks. He says, "Courage is the quality most essential to understanding the language of the world. You must not let up, even after having come so far. You must love the desert, but never trust it completely, because the desert tests all men. It challenges every step, and it kills those who become distracted." And then the horseman points south and rides away. Santiago has just met the alchemist. The next morning, 500 armed tribesmen ride into the oasis, expecting to find an easy target. Instead, they find 2,000 men waiting for them behind the palm trees. Within half an hour, all but one of the invaders are dead. The commander is spared, questioned, and then hanged from a dead palm tree. Santiago is called before the chief and given 50 gold coins. He is offered the position of counselor to the oasis. He has money, respect, safety, and the woman he loves waiting for him at the well every afternoon. So why would he leave? Why would anyone leave? He goes to Fatima the night before he leaves and tells her he is going. She says, "Before this, I always looked to the desert with longing. Now it will be with hope." He promises he will come back. She says she knows. Her father went away once too, and he always came back. And then she says something that breaks his heart and frees him at the same time. She says, "I am a desert woman, and I am proud of that. I want my husband to wander as free as the wind that shapes the dunes. And if I have to, I will accept the fact that he has become a part of the clouds and the animals and the water of the desert." She does not ask him to stay. She does not give him an ultimatum. She tells him that his dream matters and that her love is strong enough to survive the distance. That is not weakness. That is the most powerful kind of love there is. Chapter 6: The Alchemist's Lessons. That night, Santiago rides south under a sky full of stars and finds a single tent at the edge of the oasis. The alchemist is waiting. He carries 2 dead hawks over his shoulder and a falcon perched on his arm. Santiago enters the tent, expecting to find ovens, glass beakers, the strange equipment of alchemy he had seen described in the Englishman's books. Instead, there are just some carpets, a cooking stove, and a small pile of books. The alchemist lights a fire and begins roasting the hawks. The tent fills with an aroma better than any hookah Santiago has ever smelled. And then the alchemist pours him a glass of red wine. In a desert where alcohol is forbidden, Santiago asks, "Is wine not prohibited here?" And the alchemist says, "It is not what enters men's mouths that is evil. It is what comes out of their mouths that is." Santiago likes this man already, but he is also terrified of him. Santiago tries to convince the alchemist that the journey is over. He says, "I have already found my treasure. I have a camel, money from the crystal shop, 50 gold coins from the chieftains. In my own country, I would be a rich man." And the alchemist says, "But none of that is from the pyramids." Santiago says, "I also have Fatima. She is a treasure greater than anything I have won." And the alchemist says, "She was not found at the pyramids either." It is a quiet exchange, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just a man calmly pointing out that every reason Santiago gives for stopping is a reason his heart manufactured to avoid the risk of continuing. And then the alchemist does something remarkable. He does not command Santiago to come with him. He does not promise him success. Instead, he paints a picture of what will happen if Santiago stays. He says, "You will be the counselor of the Oasis. You will marry Fatima and be happy for a year. In the second year, you will remember the treasure. The omens will speak of it constantly, and you will try to ignore them. In the third year, you will walk the desert at night, and Fatima will be unhappy because she will feel she is the one who interrupted your quest. But you will not blame her, because she never asked you to stay. It was your own fear. By the fourth year, the omens will abandon you because you stopped listening. The chieftains will dismiss you. You will spend the rest of your days wealthy, comfortable, and knowing, in the deepest part of yourself, that you gave up." And then the alchemist says the line that cuts through everything. He says, "You must understand that love never keeps a man from pursuing his personal legend. If he abandons that pursuit, it was not true love, the love that speaks the language of the world." Ask yourself, have you ever used love as an excuse not to take a risk? Not because the person you loved held you back, but because staying felt safer than leaving? Santiago does not answer right away. He thinks about the crystal merchant who dreamed of Mecca for 30 years and never went. He thinks about the Englishman still fumbling with his furnace, trying to learn from books what can only be learned from living. He thinks about Fatima, who told him to go, and he says, "I am going with you." And immediately he feels peace. Before dawn, Santiago wakes Fatima and meets her among the palm trees. He tells her he is leaving. She says, "Do not say anything. One is loved because one is loved. No reason is needed for loving." They embrace. It is the first time either of them has touched the other. He promises to return. She says her eyes are filled with tears. He asks, "You are crying?" And she says, "I am a woman of the desert, but above all, I am a woman." They ride into the desert together, Santiago and the alchemist. And for the first several days, the alchemist says almost nothing. Santiago is frustrated. He expected lessons, lectures, revelations. Instead, the man rides ahead in silence, with his falcon on his shoulder, stopping only to hunt and make camp. Santiago finally asks, "Are you not going to teach me anything?" And the alchemist says, "There is only one way to learn. It is through action. Everything you need to know, you have learned through your journey. You need to learn only one thing more." But instead of telling Santiago what that one thing is, the alchemist tells him to listen to his heart. And this is where the story goes somewhere most books never go. Because Santiago's heart does not say comforting things. It does not whisper that everything will be fine. As they cross the desert, his heart tells him stories about people who searched for treasure and never found it. It tells him he might fail. It tells him he might die in the sand. And then it goes quiet for a while, and suddenly starts talking about Fatima, about the life he left behind, about how maybe the oasis was enough. Santiago says to the alchemist, "My heart is a traitor. It does not want me to go on. And the alchemist says, "That makes sense. It is afraid that in pursuing your dream, you might lose everything you have won." Santiago asks, "Then why should I listen to it?" And the alchemist gives him the answer that changes everything. He says, "Because you will never be able to keep it quiet. Even if you pretend not to have heard it, it will always be there inside you, repeating what you are thinking about life and about the world." Think about that. Your heart is not your enemy. It is not sabotaging you. It is scared, and a scared heart does not need to be silenced. It needs to be understood. If you know what your heart fears, it can never ambush you. If you listen to its worst-case scenarios, they lose their power. The boy asks, "You mean I should listen, even if it is treasonous?" And the alchemist says, "Treason is a blow that comes unexpectedly. If you know your heart well, it will never be able to do that to you." So Santiago listens. For days, riding through empty sand under blazing sun, he lets his heart speak. He stops arguing with it. He stops trying to shut it down, and slowly, something shifts. His heart stops fighting him. It begins to tell him about his own courage, the courage it took to sell his sheep, to walk into the crystal shop with nothing, to warn the chieftains about the attack. It tells him about dangers he never even knew about, a time when he was sick in the fields as a shepherd, and 2 thieves who were waiting ahead moved on because he did not show up. His heart had been protecting him all along. He just never heard it. And then one night, Santiago tells the alchemist everything his heart said, and the alchemist understands that the boy's heart has returned to the soul of the world. Santiago asks, "Is that the one thing I still needed to learn?" And the alchemist says, "No. What you still need to know is this. Before a dream is realized, the soul of the world tests everything that was learned along the way. Not because it is cruel, but so that you master the lessons, not just survive them. That is the point at which most people give up. It is the point at which, as we say in the language of the desert, one dies of thirst just when the palm trees have appeared on the horizon. Every search begins with beginner's luck, and every search ends with the victor being severely tested." Santiago remembers an old proverb from Spain. The darkest hour of the night comes just before the dawn. Chapter 7. Turning into the wind. 3 armed tribesmen appear on the trail and demand to search Santiago and the alchemist. They find Santiago's money. They find the alchemist's belongings, a small crystal flask filled with liquid, and a strange yellow glass egg slightly larger than a chicken's egg. The tribesman asks what these are, and the alchemist says, with a completely straight face, "That is the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. It is the master work of the alchemists. Whoever swallows that elixir will never be sick again, and a fragment from that stone turns any metal into gold." The Arabs burst out laughing. The alchemist laughs with them, and they let them go. Santiago is bewildered. He says, "Are you crazy? Why did you tell them the truth?" And the alchemist says, "To show you one of life's simple lessons. When you possess great treasures within you and try to tell others about them, seldom are you believed." But their luck does not hold. Days later, they are surrounded by hundreds of tribesmen in blue veils, with eyes that speak of death. They are dragged to a military camp and thrown before a chief, who accuses them of being spies. The alchemist hands over all of Santiago's gold and says, "My friend is an alchemist. He can destroy this camp with the force of the wind." The chief is skeptical but intrigued. He gives them 3 days. If the boy cannot turn himself into the wind by sunset on the 3rd day, they die. Santiago is shaking. He grabs the alchemist and says, "You gave them everything I had." And the alchemist says, "What good would money be if you were dead?" The boy says, "But I do not know how to turn myself into the wind." And the alchemist says, "If a person is living out his personal legend, he knows everything he needs to know. There is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, the fear of failure. The first day passes, battles rage nearby, wounded men are carried into camp. Santiago watches a soldier speak to his dead companion's body. You could have died after peace was declared, but in any case, you were going to die. The second day, Santiago climbs a cliff and sits alone above the desert for hours, listening to his heart, staring at the horizon, trying to understand how a boy from Andalusia is supposed to become the wind. The third day arrives. The chief gathers his officers and they march Santiago to the cliff's edge. The alchemist stands beside him, calm as stone. The tribesmen settle in to watch. Santiago looks out at the dunes, the rocks, the plants that refuse to die in a place where nothing should survive. And then he does something no one expects. He starts talking, not to the men behind him, to the desert. He says, "Somewhere you are holding the person I love. So when I look at your sands, I am also looking at her. I need your help to turn into the wind." And the desert answers, "I can give you my sands, but alone I cannot do it. You need to ask the wind." A breeze begins to blow. Santiago speaks to the wind. He says, "Help me. One day you carried the voice of my loved one to me." The wind says, "We are two different things. You cannot be the wind." Santiago says, "We were all made by the same hand, and we have the same soul. Teach me to be the wind for a few moments, so you and I can talk about the limitless possibilities of people and winds." The wind has never been asked this before. It is curious but confused. It does not know how to turn a man into the wind, and it does not know anything about love. So it blows harder, raising sand from the dunes, and says, "Maybe you should ask heaven." Santiago says, "Then help me. Fill this place with a sandstorm so strong it blots out the sun." And the wind obeys. The sky fills with sand. The sun becomes a golden disk. The tribesmen's horses scream. Weapons fill with grit. The men can barely see each other. One commander says, "Maybe we should stop this." Another agrees, but the chief watches with his arms folded and says, "I want to see the greatness of Allah. I want to see how a man turns himself into the wind." He makes a mental note of the two commanders who showed fear. True men of the desert do not flinch. Santiago speaks to the sun. The sun says, "I know about love, I know about the soul of the world, but I do not know how to turn a man into the wind. You must speak to the hand that wrote all." And Santiago turns to the hand that wrote all. He does not speak, he does not beg, he does not bargain. A current of love rushes from his heart, and he begins to pray, a prayer without words, without requests, without conditions. In the silence, he understands that the desert and the wind and the sun are all trying to understand the same thing he is. The signs written by a hand none of them can see, and he realizes that the hand that created the world is the same hand that created his soul, and that if God can turn a sea into a desert, God can turn a boy into the wind. The simum blows as it has never blown before. For generations afterward, the Arabs will tell the legend of a boy who turned himself into the wind and nearly destroyed a military camp. When the storm finally settles, Santiago is standing on the other side of the camp, beside a sand-covered sentinel. He crossed the impossible distance in the middle of a sandstorm. The tribesmen are terrified, but two people are smiling, the alchemist, because he has found his perfect student, and the chief, because that student understood the glory of God. The next morning, they are given an escort and released. Chapter 8. The Treasure. They ride until they reach a Coptic monastery at the edge of the desert. The alchemist dismounts and tells Santiago, "From here, you are alone. You are only 3 hours from the pyramids." Santiago says, "You taught me the language of the world." And the alchemist says, "I only invoked what you already knew." But before they part, the alchemist does one last thing. He asks the monks for permission to use the kitchen. He lights a fire, melts a piece of lead in an iron pan, and takes out the strange yellow egg Santiago saw earlier, the one the tribesmen laughed at. He scrapes a sliver thinner than a hair from its surface, wraps it in wax, and drops it into the molten lead. The liquid turns the color of blood. They wait for it to cool, and when the pan is lifted, the lid is gone. In its place is a disc of pure gold. Santiago's eyes go wide. He asks, "Will I learn to do that someday?" And the alchemist says, "This was my personal legend, not yours, but I wanted to show you that it was possible." The alchemist cuts the gold into 4 pieces, one for the monastery, one for Santiago to replace the money taken by the tribesmen, one for himself, and one he gives to the monk, saying, "This is for the boy, if he ever needs it." Santiago protests, "But I am about to find my treasure. Why would I need it?" And the alchemist smiles and says, "I am an old superstitious Arab, and I believe in our proverbs. There is one that says everything that happens once can never happen again, but everything that happens twice will surely happen a 3rd time." Santiago had his money stolen once by the thief in Tangier. He had it taken a 2nd time by the tribal chief. The alchemist knows something about patterns. Before he rides away, the alchemist tells Santiago one last story. In ancient Rome, during the time of Emperor Tiberius, a good man had 2 sons. One became a soldier sent to the farthest edges of the empire. The other became a poet who enchanted all of Rome with his beautiful verses. One night, the father dreamed that an angel appeared and told him, "The words of one of your sons will be learned and repeated throughout the world for all generations to come." The father woke up weeping with gratitude. He died shortly after, saving a child from a chariot accident, and went to heaven, where the angel met him again. The father asked, "Please, sometime in the distant future, let me hear my son's immortal words." The angel took him far into the future. They appeared in an enormous room filled with thousands of people speaking a language the father did not recognize. The father wept with pride. He said, "I knew my son's poems were immortal. Tell me, which poem are they reciting?" And the angel said, "These are not the words of your son, the poet. His verses were popular in Rome, but forgotten after Tiberius died. The words these people are speaking belong to your other son, the soldier." The soldier had traveled far from home and heard of a rabbi who could heal the sick. He rode for days to find him, and when he did, he looked into the man's eyes and knew he was in the presence of the Son of God. And he said the words that have been repeated for 2,000 years, "My Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed." The alchemist says, no matter what he does, every person on earth plays a central role in the history of the world, and normally he does not know it. Santiago smiles. He never imagined that such questions about life could matter to a shepherd boy. The alchemist says goodbye. Santiago says goodbye, and they ride in opposite directions. Santiago rides alone through the desert for hours, listening to his heart. It tells him the story of a shepherd who sold his flock, crossed an ocean, survived a robbery, worked in a crystal shop, crossed the Sahara, fell in love, learned the language of the world, and turned himself into the wind. And then his heart whispers something quiet but certain. It says, "Be aware of the place where you are brought to tears. That is where I am, and that is where your treasure is." He climbs a dune slowly. The full moon lights the sand like water, and when he reaches the top, his heart leaps. There, glowing in the moonlight, solemn and enormous, stand the pyramids of Egypt. Santiago falls to his knees and weeps. He thanks God for every single thing that happened. The king, the merchant, the Englishman, the alchemist, the camel driver, the chieftains, the war, the desert, and above all, the woman who told him that love would never keep a man from his personal legend. He looks at the sand and sees a scarab beetle moving across the ground where his tears fell. In Egypt, the scarab is a symbol of God. Another omen, he picks a spot and begins to dig. He digs all night. His hands bleed. The wind blows sand back into the hole, but he keeps going. And then, as the sky begins to lighten, shadows appear above him. Several men surround him. They demand to know what he is hiding. They find a piece of gold from the alchemist. They make him keep digging. He finds nothing. They beat him. They beat him until he is bleeding and barely conscious. And finally Santiago screams, "I am digging for treasure. I dreamed twice about a treasure hidden near the pyramids." The leader of the group pauses. He looks at Santiago on the ground, broken and bleeding, and then he laughs. Not a cruel laugh, an exhausted, pitying laugh. He tells his men to leave the boy alone. He has nothing else worth taking, but before he walks away, he turns back, and he says this: "You are not going to die, you will live, and you will learn that a man should not be so stupid." 2 years ago, right here on this very spot, I had a recurrent dream too. I dreamed I should travel to the fields of Spain and look for a ruined church where shepherds and their sheep slept. In my dream there was a sycamore growing out of the ruins, and I was told that if I dug at the roots of the sycamore, I would find a hidden treasure. But I am not so stupid as to cross an entire desert just because of a recurrent dream. And they leave, and Santiago lies on the sand in front of the pyramids, beaten, bleeding, broken, and laughing until his heart feels like it will burst, because now he knows exactly where his treasure is. It is buried beneath the sycamore tree, in the ruined church, in Spain, the exact place where he had the dream in the first place. Think about what just happened. A man who refused to follow his dream accidentally gave Santiago the answer that the dream itself could never provide. The treasure required someone who would not go, to tell someone who would. He travels back. It takes weeks. He arrives at the small abandoned church, just as night is falling. The sycamore is still there. The stars are still visible through the half-destroyed roof. He sits for a long time looking at the sky, drinking wine, thinking about the alchemist, the desert, the silence, and then he picks up his shovel and begins to dig. He shouts up to the sky, "You old sorcerer, you knew the whole story. You even left a bit of gold at the monastery so I could get back to this church. Could you not have saved me from all of that?" And he hears a voice on the wind that says, "No, because if I had told you, you would not have seen the pyramids. They are beautiful, are they not?" Half an hour later, his shovel hits something solid. An hour later, he has a chest of Spanish gold coins, precious stones, gold masks adorned with red and white feathers, and stone statues embedded with jewels, the spoils of a conquest the country had long ago forgotten. He takes out Urim and Thummim, the 2 stones the old king gave him so long ago, and places them in the chest. He will never need them again, but they are part of his treasure now, a reminder of where the journey began. And then the wind begins to blow. It is the Levanter, the wind from Africa, but this time it does not bring the smell of the desert or the threat of invasion. It brings the scent of a perfume he knows, and the touch of a kiss that traveled across the sand, carried on the air, slowly, slowly, until it rested on his lips. Santiago smiles. It is the first time she has done that, and he whispers, "I am coming, Fatima." Key takeaways. There is a reason this book has sold over 100 million copies and been translated into more than 80 languages. It is not because it tells you something you did not know. It is because it reminds you of something you forgot. Every person who reads this story recognizes themselves somewhere inside it. Maybe you are Santiago at the beginning, young, restless, sensing that there is more to your life than the routine you have settled into. Maybe you are the crystal merchant, comfortable, safe, and quietly terrified that your best years are behind you. Maybe you are the camel driver, someone who lost everything once and had to rebuild from nothing. Or maybe you are Fatima, loving someone enough to let them go, trusting that what is real will find its way back. So what does this book actually teach? Not in theory, in practice. What do you take with you when you close it? The first thing is that your dream knows the way, even when you do not. Santiago had no map, he had no business plan. He had a recurring dream and 2 stones from a stranger. And the path revealed itself one step at a time, not because the universe handed him a shortcut, but because he kept walking. The omens are not magic. They are attention. They are what you see when you stop sleepwalking through your own life and start noticing the patterns, the coincidences, the quiet signals that something is pulling you in a direction you did not plan. The candy seller who spoke without words, the exhausted man at the top of the hill, the hawks circling in the sky. None of these were miracles. They were moments Santiago was awake enough to catch. The second thing is that loss is not the opposite of progress. It is part of it. Santiago was robbed, and it led him to the crystal shop. He was captured, and it led him to turn into the wind. He was beaten at the pyramids, and it revealed exactly where the treasure was buried. Every single setback in this story turned out to be a setup for something he could not have reached without it. That does not mean suffering is good. It means suffering is not wasted, unless you stop moving. The third thing is the hardest one, and it is the reason most people never find their treasure. Fear does not disappear when you follow your dream. It gets louder. Santiago's heart told him he might fail. It told him he might die. It told him to go back. And the alchemist did not tell him to silence his heart. He told him to listen to it, to know his fear so well that it could never surprise him. Because a heart you understand is a heart that cannot betray you. Most people treat their fear like an enemy to be crushed. This book says, sit with it, hear it out, and then keep going anyway. That is not the absence of fear, that is courage. And the fourth thing, the thing that ties all of it together, is that the treasure was always where Santiago started. He traveled across oceans and deserts and nearly died, and the gold was buried under the tree he used to sleep beneath. So does that mean the journey was pointless? Does it mean he should have just stayed home? No, and that is the whole point. Santiago could not have found the treasure without leaving, not because the treasure needed him to travel, but because he needed to travel to become the person who could recognize it. The boy who slept under that sycamore tree 2 years ago would have walked right past the gold coins and never looked down. The boy who came back, the one who had been robbed and rebuilt, who had crossed the Sahara, who had spoken to the wind and stared down a sword, he was ready. The journey is the treasure. The treasure is just proof that the journey was real. Closing. At the beginning of this story, I told you about a boy who traveled the world only to find that what he was looking for was buried where he started. And maybe you thought that sounded like a nice metaphor, something poetic but not practical. But think about your own life for a moment. Think about the thing you keep circling back to, the idea that will not leave you alone, the restlessness that shows up at 3 a.m, the version of your life that keeps flickering at the edge of your imagination, no matter how many times you try to ignore it. That is your personal legend. And this book is not asking you to sell everything and move to the desert. It is asking you one question. Are you the person who follows the dream, or the person who stands in the crystal shop for 30 years, telling yourself that the dream is enough? Here is my question for you, and I want you to actually sit with this one. What is the one thing you have been putting off? Not because you cannot do it, but because you are afraid of what happens if you actually try. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, I would strongly recommend picking up the full book. There is a richness to the way Coelho writes. Every sentence feels like a proverb you want to underline. You can grab The Alchemist on Amazon or listen to it on Audible. The link is in the description. It is one of those rare books that changes a little bit every time you read it, because you are a little bit different every time you come back to it. If you got something from this video, subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more coming, and every single one of these deep dives is designed to give you the full experience of the book, not just the bullet points, but the stories, the ideas, and the moments that make these books worth reading in the first place. I will see you in the next one.